Huge episode today. We got special guest Rudy Stankowitz. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things that you need to help manage your pools. We'll be talking about stabilizers, cyanuric acid, black algae, phosphates. We're going to be busting some myths. So stay tuned. We got some great things coming for you that are going to be valuable to you managing your pool.
The pool's a mess, and the water is green. How much acid? How much chlorine? You tested the water, but what does it mean? Take a dive into the deep end.
Hey guys, it's Frank, and here on the deep end, special guest today. We got Rudy Stankowitz of many things. I'm not sure where all to start your
I'm I've
your
been going
introduction.
I've been going with Grand Poobah lately.
Grand Poobah.
I think it's all inclusive. So yeah, I do I started doing that virtual chapter for IPSSA, and they were like, well, okay, we're going to call you president of the virtual IPSSA chapter. I said, no, I'll only do it if we can go with Grand Poobah. So all things that refer to that virtual IPSSA chapter has me listed as the Grand Poobah, and also has the name of the chapter as the Cat 5 IPSSA chapter.
Ah.
Very it's very Florida of me.
Well, and also a lot of people don't realize that you are also a haunted mountain gymnast.
Well, I don't stick the landing. I remember Carrie Strug back in the day, she nailed it on one foot, not me. I tend to land on my back. So
Okay.
not really the best move, but that's, a lot of why I'm mostly in a wheelchair, is because, in the words of my middle grandchild, she says, no offense, but you do a lot of things an idiot would do. And I can't say that she's wrong. It's absolutely correct. So I do.
Well, that sounds like something my children would say to me. My grandkids, well, yeah, I got a couple grandkids that would say that.
She's 9, so yeah. No, well, see what Frank's referring to. So I'm going to give you the backstory on this. We went to Greece. We went to Athens. We alternate trips each year. My wife chooses one destination. I choose another. So she chooses Greece, Italy, France. I chose Arctic Circle, Galapagos Islands, Transylvania, things like that. So we're in Greece, and we're seeing all the normal stuff in Greece. The Colosseum, and it's the Parthenon in Greece, right? The Pantheon is in Italy. So it's the Parthenon. We go to that. And then somebody says, if you go 600 meters up that mountain, there's a haunted cave. I was like, well, shit, I got to go up there. So we go up, we check out the cave, and I'm climbing around in there. It used to be headquarters for this pirate, Develis, back in the day, and their god Pan lived in there. And at one point it was taken over by NATO, and there's really pretty cool. So I'm leaving there, and they go, well, if you go up another 200 meters up the mountain, there's an abandoned sanitarium. I was like, well, I gotta go up there, right? So we go up, and we're walking around, and there's all these letters all written on it and spray painted. I'm sure it all says, something like, you're gonna die if you come in here, but it's all written in Greek, so I don't know what it says. So I was like,
It's all Greek to you.
it's all Greek to me. I find a way in, and I think the group I'm with, they come in with me, right? I'm walking around. This is cool. We're ghost hunting. We're checking stuff out. Like, it's creepy. And I turn around, and they were all smart enough not to follow me in. So now all of a sudden I'm walking around in here, and like, ghosts aren't my big fear. I'm worried some crazed homeless guy is going to come yelling at Greek things at me. I'm not going to know what he's saying, or I'm going to run into a giant bear or whatever they have. Anyway, I make it through unscathed. Silliest thing, we go up another 100 meters, because I don't know if you've been in the mountains of Greece, but the Greek Orthodox, they put little churches all over the place, like little just 1-2 room churches for weary travelers, which is cool, because if it happened in the US, they'd be tagged and have spray painted things written all over them. But there, no, people respect it. So we go up to this one, and I come out, and I see this swing set by this tree going back and forth by itself. I'm sure it's the wind. But anyway, I walk over to it, and I'm standing on this slab of marble. All right, this is really cool. This is the mountain where they get all the marble from, for they built all their statues. But now I'm like, what, 1,000 meters up? You got to keep in mind now it's damp up there. So I'm on this slab of marble. My feet shoot out from under me, bam, square on my back, and I shoot right up from the shock of it. I just can't move. I can't move at all.
Jeez.
So they get me over to this Jeep and they get me back down the mountain. And my wife's like, you need to go to the hospital. You need to go to the hospital. I'm like, no, we're only in Greece for so many days. I need to go to Santorini. So that's what I did. And on the way back, I stopped at a Doc in the Box and found out that I broke my neck. But
Jeez.
that's
Wow.
a typical trip.
So how do you say 911 in Greek?
You don't. You say, take me to Santorini because you're only there for a week and you don't want to spend 3 days in a friggin' hospital. That's why. I can see the hospital here in Florida. They're just fine. I'm okay with those. Today's one of those rare days you got me. I got a lot of stuff going on right now.
Yeah. No, you do. You do. Every time I see you're posting something else, you another thing in the works. And congrats to you. And for anybody that doesn't know Rudy is a mentor in the industry. You just received an award for your mentorship from was it from Aqua?
No. I created an award for mentorship. I'm not even eligible here. I decided that, I look at all the different contests and I look at all the different things out there and I really have to be behind something in order to support it. And we were talking about it for a couple of years and finally I rolled it out. It's a mentorship award because I think if I'm going to promote something in this industry, it's going to be the one thing that is proven to make the industry better, and that is going to be to recognize those individuals that take on that role as mentor. So we set up a contest, not a contest, it's an award. There's no voting. It's not how it goes. So you have to nominate your mentor at mentoraward.com. No www. Just mentoraward.com. It's going to redirect you to a page on my website, which was cool because that's where I can collect the information. And I'm doing this through the end of June. And then I am going to research the living daylights out of every individual that's been submitted. I've come up with a way to score based off of the different criteria, based off of promoting people, how they've helped people, how much they've helped people, what creative ways they use to help people, what role they play in the industry. That's a smaller portion, but still it's there. And just really going to grade it. And then in the fall, we're going to have 10 finalists and we are going to pick one person who we name as Mentor of the Year. And instead of a trophy, we're going with a championship belt.
I like it. That's just be original. I mean, and how good would that look on the wall, right?
It would look, dude, around your waist, Frank, right? So I didn't want a People's Choice Award. I didn't want anything that was based off of how many this and that and whatever, which is all cool. Those are great. Those are important. We need those. But I wanted this to be based off of, okay, what has this person actually done?
Real merit. Yeah. So, all right. Well, so I appreciate that.
So right. mentoraward.com. Glad we got that out right in the beginning.
And real quick, your new book is released. Your Blades of Glass, Part 2.
Blades of Glass, the second edition, is released. It is available for purchase at Amazon.com. It is a psychological thriller. So it's not the normal pool manual or the Algae book that you're used to. And I do have the sequel written. It's all done. I have beta readers reading it now. And in the sequel, there does happen to be a character whose name is Mr. Disher, who happens to, run a pool store that offers service. No relation at all, strictly coincidental.
I'm guessing he's the hero. He's the one that
he plays a minor role, but he does do something pretty phenomenal in this. So that you could only expect worthy of a Mr. Disher. I think.
Okay.
But that's once my beta readers get back to me with their feedback, because I have my endings very twisty, and I want to make sure that it hits. Then I'm gonna go and start to pitch literary agents and try to get that out there. I've already started on a third, but I had to step away. I'm like, no, I need a break. I have to stop because my wife wants me to remodel the bathroom. But otherwise, that's
and
the
and
spackle on my hands.
and outside of thrillers, you also have your it's how to rid your pool of algae. Did I get the title right?
How to get
I
rid
only like
of. I wanted.
how to get rid of.
I totally
Yes,
went straight for what I thought they would search for. How to get rid of swimming pool algae. That's the title of the book.
smart,
Yeah,
smart,
because I figured
great
that
book.
might be.
I think I have a dozen copies now.
You
Uh,
might. You keep winning them.
uh, but I make all my staff read it. Fantastic information, and there's a lot you absorb a lot of other information other than just algae. You learn a lot of basic chemistry. You learn a lot of
It's a whole
theories.
pool guide. It's a whole uh, pool philosophy to keeping algae out. It's not just do this and this. It's just a culture, I guess, to set the pool up so that you're not likely to see it in the first place. So we really don't have to
Right.
worry as much about getting rid of it if we do these things where we work with the science of water chemistry instead of just throwing chemicals at it.
Yep. 100% on board with that. And I use your book. A lot of your teachings I use in
Thanks.
my teachings in the podcast to my guys, to clients. I go out and do pool schools for people who just bought a pool and they want to learn about their pool. I briefly go over, and I'm not teaching people how to clean a filter. My main thing is teach people how not to kill themselves,
Good.
and then how to simple things that need to be done on a weekly basis. Most of them end up on service anyway, but or at least they're coming into my retail store and following our instructions versus just I get really aggravated with the national groups when there's some guy in New York trying to tell somebody in Texas or Florida, oh no, you need to be doing this, when they got completely different construction methods, different water, different temperatures, different environments. And I think local instruction's much better. I always encourage people to find somebody local to give you what goes on in your area. Because, like, if I went to South Florida, I'd be lost, man.
So would
And
I.
it's again, you're in North Florida. You're probably closer to where I'm at,
I
and similarities.
I think so, yeah. But even with that, we know, just from, in 2018, I did a bunch of research on black algae, and that
And thank you for that.
you're
Holy cow,
welcome.
that's helpful.
You're welcome. That was very eye-opening for me because in looking at it and actually putting the stuff under a microscope, and I can't believe it was 2018 before it would get under a microscope and then be documented correctly. But uh, in doing that, one of the big things I learned not only was that black algae is really cyanobacteria, not only does black algae not have any roots, none whatsoever, but that it's really what it is a cyanobacteria biofilm that the cyanobacteria secretes these polysaccharidic solutions and other things can take harbor within them. And the primary constituent is always cyanobacteria. But here's the big thing for me is that I learned in taking these samples that the primary constituent that makes up that specific cyanobacteria can differ based upon geographic location in a distance as short as a mile. So, in other words, black algae is always cyanobacteria, but the species or the genre of cyanobacteria could be different from your house to your neighbors. So, to your point, what works in New York might not work in Texas. If I can get a difference in species of algae or cyanobacteria a mile from one pool to the next, imagine how vastly different that could be.
Yeah. And multiple in the same pool.
Yeah. And
So,
multiple combinations. I
yeah.
had some 3, some 2, some 1, some toxin producing, some not, some uh, nitrogen fixing, which is pretty interesting because if there's not enough nitrites in the water, the cyanobacteria nostoc, for example, is one of them, can actually take atmospheric nitrogen and use that to bring it into the water, to use it for itself. And also then, of course, obviously other things in the water can take advantage of it as well. But it's just it goes to show you how these things evolve is amazing. Cyanobacteria will be around long after we are. It was around long before us. It's actually cited as being the first source of oxygen on the planet, which makes it hard to kill.
It's been around a while. And within the biofilm, there's many other things that may be existing. Like cyanobacteria normally cannot make you sick, but a lot of things that harbor within that biofilm,
It
bacterias and stuff, and
It
mustard
depends.
algae.
Yes and no. Some cyanobacteria, yeah. Some no. Some cyanobacteria, some of the stuff like Oscillatoria I took out of a swimming pool and I brought it down to Cyanolabs in Palatka, which is one of the leading cyanotoxin research centers in the country. I brought it there. We got it under the microscope. We tested it, and it did indeed secrete microcystins, which is a hepatotoxin, which means it actually can destroy your liver. Of course, you'd have to take it in a large quantity,
Right.
and so that there's no fears if this does secrete these toxins and you have a pool that maintains a decent chlorine level, it will oxidize the toxins as they're secreted, but it still can happen. It alone, if you eat it, it can still make you sick. And then there's other kinds like spirulina, which is an oceanic cyanobacteria that people use in health foods. I ordered a smoothie the other night with it to try it out, and
With cyanobacteria.
it was gross, but that's okay. Some people like to eat gross stuff, and I'm okay with that. To each his own.
Only Rudy's. Are you going to come out with like a breakfast cereal, a cyano breakfast cereal?
Cyanopuffs.
There you go. I like
But
it.
but you're right, because check this out. And you guys see this a lot in Texas. Well, not a lot, but you see it in Texas, Naegleria fowleri, which is the brain-eating amoeba.
Yeah.
You don't get that in a pool that does not have black algae.
Really?
It has to take harbor somewhere in order so the chlorine doesn't kill it. And then if the chlorine level dips, it takes advantage, it sneaks out, it does its thing, and that's problematic. We talk a lot about Legionella. Legionella easily destroyed with a chlorine level of 1 part per million, unless it's in one of these cyanobacterial biofilms, in which case then it might take 100 parts per million before it can actually break through those layers. It's kind of like a coral reef is what a biofilm is, and it provides harbor to all the little fish, so that way when the shark swims by, they can have little nooks and crannies that it can chill out in until it's safe. And I mean,
Right.
obviously it doesn't decide, it's spewing some out when it's not good for it, so the chlorine kills it, and then when the chlorine level dips, it spews some out then as well. But yeah, a lot of different things. Diatoms, which is mustard algae, can also take harbor in
Yeah.
cyanobacteria biofilms.
Makes it much harder to kill.
There's just a lot that can happen, and it doesn't take a lot to really get in there to establish a foothold of anything.
Right. I appreciate that. Hey, Rudy, well, we're going to go to break real quick, and
Sure.
we'll be right back. All right, we're back. I got Rudy Stankowitz of CPOclass.com, author, Grand Poobah of the IPSSA a virtual chapter. If you're in the industry and there's not an IPSSA near you, but you're primarily East Coast and Midwest.
Actually, the virtual chapter is going worldwide.
Oh, sweet.
So as long as there's not, I think as long as
you're going to be the Grand Poobah of the worldwide chapter.
Yes, and as long as there's not a chapter, a physical chapter within, I think it's 50 miles of you, then you're eligible to join the virtual chapter. Of course, anybody who wants to attend any of the meetings I have them once a month, the third Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Anybody who's in any chapter or not in any chapter is welcome to attend. We do different types of education. It's more business acumen, lift folks up, celebrate them, elevate, educate, and elevate. That's the goal. And I bring in speakers not just from our industry, but across industries who have the ability to contribute to those skills, to those lessons that we don't always get
Yeah.
in the pool
Uh,
industry.
I always say I think the biggest problem in the pool industry is the people. There's fantastic pool people that are horrible business people, and that's what a lot of your guests uh, teach on. People, they don't know how to price, they don't know how to protect themselves. They don't. You do a really good job. Thank you very
You.
much for this, teaching people how to satisfy or find your customers' needs and wants and satisfy those, and satisfy wants and needs they didn't realize they had. Bring up the options, bring up the possibilities of other things they can do. And I want to thank you for that, because that's eye opening for a lot of people.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Thank
Um, hey, I want to move on to some stuff.
Yeah.
Fake news.
Okay.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Fake news. All right. One is this came up the other day. Draining. If you want to lower your CYA by draining your pool, you drain it from the top, because that's where your CYA is concentrated.
Bullshit.
Okay. Thank you. That's actually in our episode coming up.
I've
Uh,
heard that it floats. I've heard people say that. That's untrue. You'll get the same level throughout. It spreads throughout the water. It doesn't just float on the surface. It doesn't. I get the theory. If you seal off the top layer of water, then the sun can't penetrate it. But that's not what really happens. Cyanuric acid actually, uh, in water at night, it's more free floating, but in the daylight under UV rays of the sun, it forms a much more stable bond with chlorine, so it stays attached a little bit longer. But realistically, it's just going from molecule to molecule to molecule
yeah.
in a very temporary bond, releases, grabs another, releases, grabs another. It's kind of like if you were looking down on an atrium that had 100 people in it and there were 50 umbrellas, and as people walked around, everybody was just handing off an umbrella to each other continuously. That's more along the lines of what this would look like, but it's all throughout the body of water, not just the surface.
Thank you for busting that myth. I get a little aggravated when I hear ridiculous myths. Some people think CYA is like an layer of oil on
Right.
top of the pool. That's not it at all.
The only
And
thing
it's not free swimming to get to one location. It's just transferring randomly
The only
around the
thing we
pool.
have that we use that's like that are those liquid solar covers.
Yes, yes. Those are
Yeah,
those are very only at the top, but you're never
right.
going to drain those.
No.
So that's all right. Let's see. Let's get on to myth number 2. A single scoop cures your pull.
Oh my God. You know, I I decided after a little while, because it says I've been a pool pro for a decade and I've treated over 10 bazillion pools and all I use is a single scoop of this. So I started to look the people up. They only go 3 posts. They only have like 3 pictures pasted on their bio. These are the same people that, send Asian porn. That's what they are set up like. You got the 3 different pictures of somebody on it. Because somebody sends you a friend request, you click on it, you
Yeah.
see, especially if you see friends in common. And I got to talk to some of those idiots who accept these friend requests. But then you go and you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, this is a made up site. 3 pictures ago, they looked like somebody else. Right. So it's the same thing. These only go back 3 or 4 pictures, not even more than a year. This person was created just specifically to be an expert. It's like a cartoon character. They're not real. They're just made up. And this is what they say. And no, the big danger in that, I believe that's a copper sulfate based product, is if you add a scoop a week of a copper sulfate based product and you're not testing the copper level in the water, eventually you will get to a point where your water levels are no longer considered safe to swim in because your copper level is so high.
Yeah. Uh, it's now and you can get a pretty blue pool by
It will be
using
blue.
copper sulfate.
Oh,
It
yeah.
will be
The plaster will be blue. The
your
white
hair.
plastic cushions and fittings that go on your return jets will be blue. Your hair will be green. That won't be
Yes.
blue.
Well,
But
it's more of a turquoise. Is turquoise a green or a blue?
it's, well, Statue of Liberty greens, which is a blue,
Okay.
I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
You
All right.
promised there'd
I got.
be, you promised no hard questions. It's early.
All right. One other thing, this came up in a group the other day. I sent this to you, and your response was, "Wow, that's a lot of words in a row." Uh, it's,
That was my thought. You can read the question. It's just,
it's basically I had somebody in my DFW pull owner group, which we're about to hit 10,000 members. I'm really excited about this. But somebody asked, "Hey, how do hey, my pool's green, how do I treat it?" And one person who I believe is from the industry, and it kind of shocked me, said, "Well, you need to turn off your circulation system because your chlorine works better when it's sitting still and it doesn't off gas." And then gave instructions on how, basically gave breakpoint chlorination instructions on how that kills algae. Where, but those were even messed up. But
it,
Rudy,
it was a lot of
your
words.
expert advice. Should you turn your pump off if you're trying to treat algae?
No, never. You want to run your pump. You want to run your pump more. I mean, it really, if I'm going to run it more than necessary, it really depends on what type. If it's a planktonic algae, meaning free floating, then yeah, I'm going to run my filter nonstop until it's gone. Mustard algae, black algae, you know what? I'm not going to run it any less than I normally do, but I might not run it 24/7. But yeah, but I, at no point in time, unless I'm adding aluminum sulfate, letting it circulate for a couple of hours,
Yes.
then I shut that off so that way I can form a successful flock, which then drops to the floor. I need it to be off so that way the flock will drop. And that would be the only thing I could think of where I would. And I've used that and to see how it works in with algae, specifically with black algae. And we've had some luck there, and I don't know why just yet. And I just have a few theories on it. But about 40% of the time, I can get the black algae to drop, but it's because of the alum, not because we stopped the water with chlorine. It's because that's what I need to form my flock.
And the algae is basically bonded with metals, the attractions and all that, the ions, right? That's why it will
Well,
drop.
I
It
think
loses its
what's
attraction to the wall.
Yes, because it's the outer wall of the cell that controls its ability to stick to things. And the cell wall has a negative charge. And when I add aluminum sulfate to water, what I'm ending up with is aluminum in a +3 charge of oxidation, which I believe I'm neutralizing the charge, which is then just causing it to fall off. Because I've actually taken some and put it on a slide under a microscope, and I've injected what would be an equal amount in parts per million of aluminum sulfate or aluminum to the solution to watch, and it doesn't seem to die as quickly as what we're seeing fall off the walls. So it has to be releasing.
Hey, do you have anything in writing or anything anybody can access on the studies you've done on alum?
I put a paper together and I put it on ResearchGate. It was a very quick thing that I did, and it is up there. But yeah, on ResearchGate.net, I do have probably one of the less scientifically written things that I have there, or that is there, but it is there. So yeah, I have
Okay.
that there, and that is, I believe, all encompassing.
Otherwise, it's just things you share through social media,
I have a bunch
personal
of stuff.
contacts,
I have a bunch
CPO
of stuff on my
classes.
blog. I've shared things in different groups, and I've spoken on this topic at a couple of different things. But I really did just want to get something together. So when I say it's hurried, it is a little hurried. I think, on balance, though, Q Hales, Kim Skimmer, and those folks out on yours, well, a little bit past you, to more in California, I think. I think they've actually built upon that. So they might have a little bit more. They maintain that journal of pool chemistry. Have you seen that before?
I have seen it. I haven't dove into it though.
I wouldn't be surprised if it ultimately ends up in there.
Right. And anybody that is in the industry, seriously, you're kind of missing the boat if you're not following Rudy. Get his books. What you have, Rudy the pool guy, or
Rudy,
is it?
yeah, Rudy Stankowitz pool guy on Facebook.
Yes. And
Otherwise, my handle everywhere except well, it's mostly it's at CPO class. That's my handle on almost everything social media. There's a couple of things where it wasn't available, but for the most part, I think on the majority of stuff, if you follow at
yeah.
CPO class, you'll find me.
So yeah, if you're in the industry, you need to be following Rudy. There's a lot to be learned uh, that only Rudy teaches. I don't hear it elsewhere unless somebody's just repeating Rudy. I repeat Rudy all the time. But if you're in the industry, you need to be hunting down Rudy and where his information is available. It really is. Now, if you're a pool owner, it's going to be over your head. Trust me.
Not all of it,
It's
some of
well,
it.
not all of it, but
Some of it's over
you,
my head. What did I
you
say?
need it's it's, but yeah, if you're in the industry, man, hunt down Rudy. And if you're a really like you're a pool owner that really wants to know, follow Rudy, get his books, good stuff,
Check
really
out.
good stuff.
I have a site where I have some online classes. They're pre-recorded. There's some that are free. There are some that are at a fee. It's onlinepoolclasses.com.
Yeah,
Onlinepoolclasses.com. I have a very good class on there that's free on water testing, but not just testing water, on recognizing the interferences water tests, the things that give you the goofy results, and then deciphering what those mean and what they can tell you about your pool, because they can really tell you a lot. And that I have on there as a free class, because I think if there's anything, everybody should be able to
yeah.
accurately analyze a water test. uh, And there doesn't need to be a charge for that. That should just be open to everybody. So I have that there free.
And
Onlinepoolclasses.com.
and kudos to that, because seriously, if you're not testing well, you're dead in the water.
Exactly.
Uh,
No
yeah,
pun.
it's you're if you can follow all the instructions on the planet, but if you're not testing so you can dose appropriately or take the proper action, then you're screwed. That's just all there is to it. You're
There's a
screwed.
couple of key things, and that's one of the big ones. Yeah, that calculating gallonage. Okay, we can always add a little bit more, but you really, if you're not testing to get accurate results, and you have to know whether they're accurate or not. And the thing is, there's some things that people tell you about all day long. Like, for example, if your chlorine level is greater than 15 parts per million, the your pH test, the phenol red that we use to test pH, that chemical can actually complex with the chloride, and what you get is this neat new chemical or compound, chlorophenol red, which is still used in science to test pH, but it tests a very different range, 4.4 to 6.6, and anything above 6.6 looking this brilliant dark purple color. But I can tell you it's a brilliant dark purple all day long, and it's not really going to click until somebody shows you. And that's what I do in these classes is I say, hey, this is what happens, and here, this is what it looks like, so you can better recognize it when it happens. And no guessing, is this or is this that? No, this is what it looks like. Boom.
I appreciate that. Hey, we're going to go to break real quick, and we'll be right back.
The pool's a mess, and the water is green. How much acid? How much chlorine?
Everybody, we're back with Rudy Stankowitz of CPOclass.com and many, many, many other things. And we've been talking about a lot of things, but I want to jump into phosphates a little bit.
I want to surprise you
Uh,
with something you weren't expecting first. I'm going to be really quick about it.
Here we go.
How many fingers am I holding up?
3.
That's exactly where the Deep End podcast sits in relation to not all pool podcasts, but all podcasts on the planet. You are in the top 3%.
Oh, sweet.
I looked those up
Uh,
this morning.
where'd I pick up the check?
From me, it's in the mail.
Okay. Well,
All
thank you for
right.
that.
Sorry,
I mean,
phosphates.
and I'm sure you're rated higher than I am. So, and kudos to you for your success.
Thank you.
That's big stuff. All right. Want to talk about phosphates a little bit. I know there's a big push out there, especially in retail, where everybody, sell phosphate removers, sell clarifiers, sell all this. I tend to be on the team of, what, chlorine's your best thing. Chlorine and balanced water, that takes care of the vast majority of issues you're going to have. But there, my whole thing, from Bob Lowry, got this for him, and I think you even teach this, is kill the algae faster than it multiplies. You win.
Mhm.
It's pretty simple. But some things you can do is slow how fast the algae can multiply, so it takes less to kill it faster than it multiplies. And that's key. Well, phosphates is one of those things that people go to. And but people are like, oh my gosh, you tested 200 parts per billion on phosphates, man, you need a phosphate remover.
Mm.
I mean, it doesn't hurt, but tell me a little bit about phosphates, Rudy.
I like to
From a
say, phosphates aren't a problem until they are.
Yes.
So if you've tried everything else and you have a phosphate level over 200 parts per billion, as your example, then okay, we'll look at it. But even at 500 parts per billion of phosphates, I really don't consider that to be a major issue. Now, much above that, then it can get a little bit interesting. Uh, but it doesn't mean you can't maintain the pool without adjusting those. It just means that, maybe it would get a little bit easier. Now, if you have a saltwater pool, that's a whole different scenario. We want to keep that number as well below 100 parts per billion as we can because phosphates like to coat things. And this is where that's one of the primary reasons they're in the pool now is because they like to coat things. Because, and a lot of people don't even
Yep.
realize that this has been happening, but ever since Flint, Michigan, where they decided to draw water from a natural body instead of treated water, and they corroded the inside of pipes, sent lead into people's homes. The country sat up and took notice, a lot of the municipalities, and they said, hey, you know what? We got a lot of lead plumbing underground too. So we could go in and pull that out, which would be
Billions.
super expensive job to do. Yeah, it would take a long time, disrupt water supply for millions of folks forever and a day. Or we could add anti-corrosion chemicals to the mix. And that's what they started to do. And the two primary anti-corrosion chemicals they've been using are silicates and orthophosphate. And orthophosphate is exactly the direct phosphate that algae needs. Now, any other phosphate you add over the course of roughly uh, 2 weeks at the chlorine levels we maintain in pools and the pH and stuff is typical, that'll become orthophosphate. But they're adding it directly to the water, and they're doing that because it coats the insides of the plumbing. But it does mean it's also coming in directly from the tap. So since Flint, Michigan, we are actively adding a lot more phosphate to water than we had been prior to that.
Right. And you will see spikes
You
where
will.
it's like all of a sudden, you've been maintaining this certain level of phosphates, and all of a sudden see this huge spike. I mean, sometimes like over 2,000 parts per billion. It's crazy. And then after you handle that, the phosphate issue, it's not coming, it goes away kind of.
No,
It
but and
it
you
goes
can
back to normal.
right, and you can pick and choose how you treat this in a body of water as well. You can go with a phosphate remover if you want to. You can also go with a borate system like you use. Frank, we spoke about that with adding borates to the water. Uh, because it's a whole other it treats it differently. Borates not only serves as a buffer against an upward drifting pH, it does also serve as an algistat, which does prevent algae. Algistat meaning prevents algae from growing, doesn't kill it, but it does prevent it. So you have that other layer of protection there, so maybe the phosphates aren't as big of a deal. But if it gets to the point where you've tried everything, and I don't see a pool with a borate level in it ever getting to that point, maybe on a golf course where the phosphate levels in the water might be 2,000 parts per billion plus, maybe then, just simply because, it takes a lot of crap to keep the greens green, Franks, and they spray that stuff everywhere and it gets in the water. In that scenario, I might worry more. But if you're taking care of your pool fine and you're not having issues and you're maintaining a good chlorine level, really you shouldn't have a lot of headaches. And if you
Right.
do, then we grab the phosphate remover.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like with borates, in relationship to algae, uh, the whole killing it faster than it multiplies. Well, phosphate is algae food. And the
Correct.
way I kind of look at it is when you have borates, when you're keeping borates at a certain level, then it doesn't matter if the food's there, the algae cannot consume the phosphate at the same rate. So it's like you put a muzzle on the algae. So even though the food's there, it's not able to eat it and use that to multiply.
Yeah, I like
Am I
that. That's a good
okay?
analogy. That works.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hate it when I find out the analogy I've been using is stupid, but so I really appreciate
So do
that.
I.
Uh,
And
uh,
it happens to the best of us. We were talking about fake news, for I've been in the industry a long time, and you know what? There was a time where somebody taught me that I could lower my total alkalinity without affecting the pH.
by how you pour a column of acid.
Yes. I was taught that in
Oh,
the early 90s, and there was a good bit of time there. Well, you know what? That's what so and so taught me. That must be the way that it is. But
so back to fake news.
back to fake
You
news, it always
cannot.
goes back. No, you cannot.
Yet you always lower alkalinity and pH when you add acid
Correct.
for either or. It's
Correct.
because
Always.
the adding the acid takes carbon, or the carbonates creates carbonic acid, which
Mhm.
is lowering the carbonates, and the carbonic acid lowers pH. So
Correct.
you cannot do one without the other. Another big fake news point. I love teaching people that because a lot of times they're like, no, no, yeah, that's science.
It
It
depends
works.
on the room. It really does. You know who believes that to be true more than any other group of folks is people, and I hate to I find no one in the IPSSA group believes this. No IPSSA person believes this. So that's thankfully due to the training program that they have to go through, and I know who wrote that, and so do you. That was Bob Lowery's training that wrote the IPSSA. I have a signed copy there, the basic training IPSSA,
Yep.
and but
Great book, by the way. Great book.
outside of that, not really any other industry except for pool service professionals, and it's not everybody, but it's a good chunk, and people like to hang on to these myths or things that they were taught early on with a death grip. And the reality of it is you know we have so much more uh, or so well, we have such better technology nowadays to actually look at things and see what we're doing, that yeah, you know what, folks might have thought that 30, 40, 50 years ago, but here's the evidence, and here's what we're looking at right now. And if you break it down chemically, like you just said, muriatic acid is hydrochloric acid, it's HCl. When you put that into water, it dissociates. What you get is a hydrogen ion, and you get chloride. So yeah, we do actually add chlorides to the water with every dose of acid. But that hydrogen ion, pH is the measurement of hydrogen ion activity in a body of water. It's measured in the converse. So the lower the pH, the greater the activity, the higher the pH, the less the activity. But that's what it is. You can't add hydrogen ions without affecting that. It's impossible
Yep.
to add more hydrogen ions without affect. That would be like me saying, hey, Frank, you know what? I'm going to put more money in your bank account, but it's not going to affect the balance. It's gonna stay right where it is. You just feel good knowing I'm putting more in there, but don't expect to see it on paper.
That sounds like Texas. So, but hey, I know your time is limited. I got one more point I would like you to address,
When you
if you
fall off
would.
mountains, you have to go to doctors. That's just all there is to it.
All right. All right. All right. A lot of, all right, CYA. We know that more CYA there is in the water, the more chlorine it takes to accomplish what you need to accomplish to kill algae faster than it can multiply. All right. A lot of these salt manufacturers, and maybe you can help me wrap my head around this theory or confirm this theory for me. Like oh, you need to run higher CYAs when you have a salt system. And I am theorizing just because the way my head works, they say that so people will stop calling in and complaining, saying that they have no chlorine in their pool and they have the salt system. Well, if you have higher CY, you are going to be able to hold chlorine better, but it's less effective. So to stop their complaints that they're not producing enough salt because a salt system is a very slow process of creating chlorine, that they want the higher CYA so they can say, see, it works. There is chlorine in the water, even though the chlorine's less effective.
That, yes, that's absolutely true. And a part of that is that they're woefully undersized to a certain extent.
Yes.
If you have a salt
Yes.
cell that it says it's good for a pool that's up to 25,000 gallons, and you put that on a 20 to 25,000 gallon pool, that is good, and that'll hit the target chlorine level as long as you don't really have any other problems, like
Right.
people getting in, things like that.
Yes.
So it's kind of
Like swimmers.
yeah,
I
those
mean, if you allow
that
swimmers in your
or
pool,
sunlight or things like that. So remember back in the day, Toys R Us, when they used to be a thing, and they carried the little 3 foot by 12 Intex pools, and it came with that little filter system that we like to, laugh at. But
yeah,
realistically, that filter system was sized to that pool perfectly.
just not,
Not
just not with those.
couldn't not a drop more, not a chemical problem, not a phosphate, not wind, not leaves, not sand, not dirt, not people, but it was sized to that amount of water. And in a lab, that would work great. And that's what we have here. So we have this salt system that's struggling to keep up in the first place because we really should have the next size cell on
Yeah,
that system. And if you do that, then the headaches are reduced greatly. Even the amount of acid you use would be reduced greatly because you're not running it at as a highest percentage to try to keep up. But right now, basically, you have something that's struggling to keep up, and here comes sunlight. So,
yeah.
okay, that's a problem. So, how do we make the sunlight go away? Well, we add more cyanuric acid, and now look, it's not struggling to keep up. It's not as effective, like you said. But so then the question comes up, well, why don't I get algae as easily in a saltwater pool as I do in a traditionally treated pool with the traditional means of chlorine tablets, granule, liquid, whatever? Why doesn't that happen? And that's simple also because freshwater algae doesn't like to grow in salt water.
Yeah.
And basically, brackish water is 1,200 parts per million. That's where that starts at. So around 16 to 1,800 parts per million. Green algae starts to have trouble getting established. Around 18 to 2,000, mustard algae will have trouble starting to get established. And around 2,400 parts per million, black algae even will have. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means it's harder for it to get a foothold. But saltwater pools were starting out at 3,000 parts per million right off the bat. So, yeah, it's like another preventative measure against algae. But keep in
It's like
mind,
borate.
they've found
It's like
bacteria in the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
So
So it's like borates in the water,
there
salt.
is a
Well,
good
borates is a
reason.
salt.
Yeah,
So
there's a good
uh,
reason not to have a high CYA. Yeah,
yeah.
but it's a good idea not to have a cyanuric acid level too much higher than the percentage of chlorine level that we talk about. And it's like, I think it's 5% is what they're saying now is fine. It used to be 7.5%, but now they're saying 5. I like 7.5.
Yeah, 7.5
Meaning
is
that if you have 100 parts, right? If chlorine level 7.5% of your cyanuric acid level. So if you have 100 part per million of CYA, then you want a 7.5 ppm chlorine level. And obviously, we want numbers much, much lower than that. That's just for easy math.
yeah. And when we do borates, we'll drop it to 5. We'll
Yeah.
accept 5, and then if we have a difficult to manage pool, we'll use BlueRay XL, which even allows us to go a little bit lower if we wish, but we don't want to go below that level where we're not killing pathogens and stuff like that. So we got to
And
be
that's
careful.
another
But
one of those things too. When we're looking at phosphates, we can go back to the phosphate levels from there. Um, copper sulfate, BlueRay XL, the trifecta, copper, silver, zinc, right there. And we could have a whole episode on how that works, um,
right,
maybe for another date. But yeah, if you can go that route instead of borates. You can go borates instead of phosphate removers, or you can use any combination of the three, and it just gives you better protection. And is there a reason why? Um, the world is changing toward sustainability, with Gen Z becoming the primary pool owner in this country. They're not now, but they're heading that way because we're aging out, and the
yep,
younger folks coming in, and sustainability and eco-friendly is important. And that's where a lot of these chemicals like boric acid and phosphate removers and copper sulfate are going to come in, because they are considered to be more eco-friendly. So
right,
benefit there.
and a simple scoop.
God. But anyway,
Right.
one last thing I want to say about cyanuric acid before I do
Yes.
got to run. The
Yes.
big problem. Yes. You know what? Chlorine lock, you can always add more chlorine and it's going to work. So let's wipe that off the table. But the big problem with a high cyanuric acid level is that people don't take it into consideration when looking at their total alkalinity, the contribution to total alkalinity, when they're calculating their saturation index. So there's a lot of times where folks think that they're dealing
Yes.
with something that's not corrosive when it actually is. So we
Yep.
have to account for the contribution of cyanuric acid to total alkalinity, because that test picks up carbonates, bicarbonates, hydroxides, and cyanurics if they're used. And we don't want those in our number. So
Yes. So you need to have the adjusted alkalinity, adjusted
correct.
for
And
CY.
that's the biggest problem I see with cyanuric acid, is that people just they don't take it into consideration, and they end up with a corrosive body of water. And then when their pool is etched, they wonder what the heck happened.
Yep. Yep. I've done a lot of pools after I did all the calculations. They thought they were balanced, and they had a alkalinity of like 10 or 20.
It can happen
after
if
the
you have
math was done.
if you have a total alkalinity of 60, which we sometimes recommend if you have an upward drifting pH, because at 60 parts per million total alkalinity, CO2 actually dissolves in water easier, so it's harder to make it outgas. So that's not an uncommon number used, especially if we have fountains or any form of turbulence or whatever. So if we keep that at 60, but then we have, and again, we'll make the math easy, we have a cyanuric acid level of 90, that means that our 60 part per million total alkalinity is really 30.
Yep. And
that's where it gets scary.
All right.
So,
Rudy, hey, I know you got to run, bud.
I gotta fly.
Man, it's always an honor to have you on the show, and I appreciate everything you do for the industry.
No, thank
guys,
you for having me.
CPOclass.com. CPO Class. Talking Pools is his podcast. I did not mention your podcast. A fantastic podcast.
Thank you.
And you got a whole team doing podcasts Monday through Friday. And
we got a bunch of folks.
Yeah, you're hitting it from a lot of different angles with, from the business side to, you got Ivan, you got all these different things going on. But appreciate your time, and we'll see you down the road, bud.
All right. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
All right. And y'all need to consider this an honor. You got to hear Rudy talk about some stuff. So we'll talk to y'all soon.
The pool's a mess, and the water is green. How much acid? How much chlorine? You tested the water, but what does it mean? Take a dive.